What is your best ghost/paranormal experience story? Camping at a friend's family property with a group of friends. They had a huge dingy shop full of old tools and old furniture that was super creepy. Dirt floor, clown paintings in the loft, not even kidding. We stayed up late drinking by the fire, and I was the last one awake. Went to go pee on the side of the shop, and stood about 5 feet away looking inside through the window. There was a fluorescent light on, and I noticed what looked like a piece of paper or dollar kind of floating around. I thought it was a moth at first, but it was moving in a very flowing figure 8 pattern that was very rhythmic. It reminded me of dangling a carrot. I watched it for maybe 20 seconds, which felt like forever. Then it quickly floated back to the corner of the shop, where it was dark. There was also a wood chair near the corner, that added to the creepiness. Could have been a moth though. I sat back down by the fire to finish my beer, and have a smoke. No one else was awake, so I played Robot Unicorn Attack 2 on my phone for a while. I noticed my friend Mark pop out of his tent to pee, then go back in to go to sleep. I decided sleep sounded good, so I went to my tent and fell asleep. The next morning, we were having breakfast and Mark said, "I saw you guys sitting by the fire super late. How late did you stay up?" I told him I was probably 2 or 3 AM. Then he said, "Who was up with you?" I told him I was the last man standing. He said, "I got up to pee and saw you on your phone and 2 people over your shoulder watching you play." He said one person looked bigger, so he thought it was one of our friends, who was a bigger dude. He said the other person was taller and skinny, but none of us are noticeably tall or skinny. Freaked me out. We still camp at that property once a year, but I don't go in the shop, and I go to sleep whenever my wife decides she's tired. Ghosts just trying to figure out WTF you doing. Ghosts be like, man, we died before this came out. We missed video games. Damn, they're lucky. A few years back, some friends and I were driving on some back roads in a patch of woods believed to be haunted. One of my friends was getting bored, so he rolled down his window and shouted, "Make something happen," or something along those lines. About 5 seconds after he rolls up the window, there is a strong, seemingly too well timed to be natural knock on the window closest to me. We've seen some weird speep in those woods, but nothing that couldn't be explained by shadows or animals. There is no explanation for that knock. Nothing was thrown at the car. We weren't moving. It sounded the way a knock made by a human hand sounds, etc. Actually, later on, we heard a very feminine shriek in those woods with no explanation either. So there's that. The shriek could have been a fox or a mountain lion. Or Ned Flanders. Small but weird. I rented a room in a New England farmhouse. Grad school. First night. About 2 in the morning. I had a very clear feeling I was being checked out by some sort of house spirits, but they approved. I went back to sleep. First time my girlfriend came over, she sat up in bed. I asked what's up, and it was almost word for word. Something was checking her out, but there was no threat. A few weeks later, my brother came over. Next morning, unprompted as he came downstairs, he said he felt like something was checking him out at night, but it was okay. A new housemate, later, said the same thing his first morning. None of them knew each other. It was weird. TL. Doctor. 4 guests in a New England farmhouse said spirits checked them out the first night. God, I wanna know what happens when someone gets checked out, but they are deemed not okay. The spirit will firmly, yet in a friendly fashion, ask them to leave. A bit paranormal perhaps. My grandfather got into the hospital on a Friday night. Nothing too unusual. He wasn't doing good, but he had been there before. The next day, I go to work. I'm somewhat worried, but again, he'd been there before. I go on with my day. There are customers. A friend stops by and we talk. And I fill the rest of the time with homework. My grandfather is in the back of my mind, but I have other stuff going on. You know? Right around 4 o'clock. I was chatting with a coworker when I glanced at the clock and my stomach dropped. I randomly got filled with dread and profound sadness. I continue chatting, but the feeling persists. I check out at 5. The feeling of gloom persisting. and of course my brain goes to my grandfather. I just knew. I get home, and my mother tells me my grandfather passed away. I ask around what time. 4 o'clock. I had a similar experience with my aunt. Just a normal day at work, and then I get this overwhelming feeling of dread and anxiety out of nowhere. An hour later I get a call from my mom letting me know that my aunt had been in a car crash an hour earlier and had died at the scene. I had a similar experience with my great uncle. He was in hospice care in September, and I felt like I should check in with him suddenly one day. I called him, and we talked for a while. He passed away the next day. In 2012, my grandmother suffered a major stroke resulting in hospice in her home with her children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren by her side. Friends and family were able to come by freely and spend time with her. I was very close to my grandma and was lucky to be able to share much of this time with her. For anyone that has ever been through hospice with a loved one, you will understand how hard this type of thing can be. One night I was sitting at home in my office catching up on some work, when all of a sudden the room filled with the scent of perfume. I'm not talking about a faint smell. I'm saying it was very distinctive and strong throughout the entire room. I stopped everything I was doing and said out loud to myself, something is wrong. That is Gram. I had not spoken to my family that day, but felt an urgent need to send a text message to my uncle, whom was staying with her, to ask you guys okay. This was at 11:20 p.m. I got a response right away saying, might want to come say goodbye. Not okay. I quickly rushed over. Upon arrival, the living room, where my family was congregated, was very silent, filled with blank faces. Without saying anything, I walked straight to my grandmother and kissed her on the forehead, saying I love her. She was still warm, but no longer breathing. I told my uncle that I was there because grandma had brought me there. I asked when she passed, and he replied saying 5 minutes before I sent my text. This puts the perfume in my office at nearly the exact same moment. Now, I'm going to say that I was born into an Irish Catholic family, but I'm in no way a religious person. I would have been the first person to discount this type of story if you told it to me. But I must say, this experience had me thinking that there really is something more out there. I felt it. There really wouldn't be so much hype about the paranormal unless so many people actually felt it. Glad you got that closure from your grandma. Sounds like you had a great relationship with her. I had just started a new job. The building I worked in was really old, definitely pre-war. I had to stay a bit later than I normally would to get something done, and by the time I was packing up to leave, my floor was pretty empty. I needed to use the restroom before I left, so I walked over there, and as I approached the door I saw someone else open the door and go in. I remember vividly that they were wearing a pink shirt and khakis, because that's what I was wearing too. I was also mildly annoyed, because I don't like being in the bathroom when someone else is in there. After deciding I still definitely needed to pee before the commute home, I entered the bathroom. But when I got in, it was completely empty. I don't know how to describe the energy in the room, but it was very tense, completely silent. I remember being able to hear my heartbeat. After standing completely frozen for what felt like 10 minutes, it was probably like 15 seconds. I turned right around and left. I had nightmares about that bathroom for weeks. It seems so simple and uninteresting compared to a lot of other people's stories here, but it really shook me. There was something definitely off about the whole thing. Glad I work from home now. I think you saw yourself, bro. When my middle child was about 5 to 3, we lived on an old house with a lot of poorly built self-done renovations done on it. There was an under-house storage area / workshop area accessible from one of the bedrooms. This workshop has a hatch door to the dirt under the house. Anyway, my daughter used to complain about the blue lady that lives under the house. We moved and never heard about it again. Ever hear the harmonica at night? Maybe she meant blues lady. Bleeding gum Susan. Best damned blues lady on the Mississippi Delta.